Hello and welcome to the ARTI'VIEW by ARCHES program. I'm Chloe Baker and I'm going to get in touch with Annie Murphy Robinson. Annie, hello.
Hi, Chloe.
It's an honour to be with you on the other side of the screen for this ARTI'VIEW by ARCHES.
Thank you.
Where are you based?
I'm based in Sacramento, California, which is smack dab in the middle. Happens to be the capital. Not a lot of people know that. It's also fondly known as Cowtown because we have a lot of cattle and agriculture.
So tell us about your workspace. Where do you work?
Well, presently we are in one half of the garage that is attached to my house. And my husband walled it in for me. He framed it and walled it in 20 years ago. So I work out here mostly. And I also have a little corner in my room that I work at school where I teach.
So tell us more about that school where you teach.
I teach at a continuation high school. And I've been there for 14 to 15 years.
Tell us about your art.
Well, my art's basically kind of like just a self-reflection. It's the only subject that I can honestly portray has been really my experience, and I use my daughters mainly. I was my subject matter in graduate school a long time ago, and since then, I graduated in 2002. I started just taking pictures of my children and dressing them up in strange outfits and putting them on fur rugs and making them wear horns on their head and look wild. And by the time the end of the photo session happened and they were giving me that look of, right, after they stopped being goofy, I was like, bingo, that's the look I want. So because of that, I really do believe that like if I had to sum it up to one word, my work is pretty bittersweet. There's something haunting about it.
And tell us about your technique. What technique do you use?
So I call it the charcoal sanding technique. It's pretty descriptive. I basically cover the paper with charcoal and then I sand it down to a really light gray and kind of open up the kind of weave of the paper, the cotton, the little tiny cotton fibers. And then I'll add charcoal and then I sand some away. So this is both additive and subtractive, this technique. So I feel like it allows me to sculpt.
Do you use sandpaper on paper then?
I use sandpaper to sand the charcoal into the paper. I'll show you. Here's a little piece of the sandpaper. So I'll use this little guy and I go like, just use my thumb and I sand the charcoal into the paper, which creates a little bit, it doesn't fall off. It's more sturdy. Charcoal drawings in and of themselves are very delicate, and this really does toughen it up because it embeds the charcoal to some degree into the paper fibers. And then I end up, in a lot of areas, closing the fibers down with the same sandpaper. So with a clean piece of sandpaper, I call them like they're almost slick. I will close off the paper, especially in the white areas, and it kind of seals it in. It's a strange technique. I've just been messing around with it for almost 20 years, and it's been a labor of love.
In a few words, how do you describe your art?
I love it, and it's I think too, part of the sanding process is very meditative and it becomes kind of addictive. Once you get used to the feeling of sandpaper and you start feeling the paper underneath, I mean, sometimes I just need to sand, and I know that sounds weird, but like it's like a back and forth. It's the physicality of just the sanding that gives me time to really interpret and create what I'm drawing, because it's my interpretation of the subject matter, and it's like this weird back and forth, because the process of charcoal sanding takes a while. It takes a while, but then it presents itself really well, and it's quite seductive, because when it does present itself, you go, oh, wow. And I still go, wow, that looks so cool. And other times it can, you know, be very maddening, because the paper has to be perfectly sanded, and there's a lot of little subtleties, I feel like, that over time become just kind of second nature. Feeling the paper underneath, adjusting the pressure of the sanding and of the thumb, as well as the charcoal pencils that I use too, and adjusting that, yeah.
And who would you say have been the greatest artists of all time who have convinced you?
I have a pretty good obsession going with the pre-Raphaelites. I have a book by Waterhouse that my mom gave me for Christmas, and I love just looking through it and getting lost in this mythology of, I don't know, the 1200s, the 1300s, right? That era where magic was absolutely real for people. And as a kid, when I started drawing, I felt like magic could be possible, especially through drawing. But having seen Bernini at the Borghese, I would say that was a moment that I absolutely will not forget.
And tell us about a key turning point in your career.
Technically, it was being introduced to Troy Dalton and discovering this charcoal sanding technique. And I think as far as the power of art and what it can do for the maker, would have to be when I started this series I did called the Sasquatch series, and they were nude self-portraits, and some sexual abuse came up for me when I was a child, and in doing the work, I realized that's what the work was about, and being able to move through with the knowledge that that's what the work was about, and like kind of imbuing the image with power and strength, and taking the shame out of what happened, was definitely a key turning point for me. And I realize now that everything that I pick, the pictures, the outfits, the lighting, all of those choices are embedded in my experience, and influenced by things that I continue to find, the works of other artists. It's just a culmination of that. And I feel like for me, the power of it in and of itself is really connecting with others who have had a similar experience or a shared experience, where they look at the art and it moves them in such a way that they emote. And that's my job. First is to get the viewer to look for more than 2 seconds, and then connect with the viewer in a way that's meaningful. And it's usually not, I would say the people who have let me know about the connection, it has been a shared experience similar to mine, or some kind of abuse or neglect in their childhood.
Good, thank you. That's valuable. It's priceless. And what was your first experience with ARCHES papers?
So it's kind of funny, because I was just looking for a big paper. I was looking for a roll of paper. And I went to the local art store, which was Utrecht at the time. And I was kind of looking for like a heavy paper. So I knew that I had to sand it, and it needed to be pretty heavy because I'm abusing it, right? I'm sanding into it and it's fluffing off. And so I picked up BFK Rives 300 gram, I think it's gram, printmaking paper. That paper is the best paper for the technique that I continued to refine, which is the charcoal sanding. And I have tried other papers, and I have not found a paper that will produce the same effects that ARCHES BFK Rives does. Yeah, so I love it. I love hate it, Chloe, because I really want it to be wider, but at the same time, nothing else works like it. And literally it becomes almost like leather, like this pliable leather. So you work it, you sand it, you smooth it, you're, you know, squishing in charcoal and removing it. I could feel the livingness, I think, of the paper. And I do talk to my paper as well. So just an admission of guilt. I will talk to it.
Good point. Thank you. And the ultimate question. If you were to be off to a desert island, what would you pack?
Aside from survival tools, the army vet in me, before being an artist, I was in the army in the 80s. So it would be my yoga mat, a meditation cushion, because it's really hard to sit still for a long time unless you really got a good cushion. And I would say my big book, which is my 12-step book that keeps me sober.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being so interesting and wonderful. And thank you for your art, which is really beautiful. And as you say, really helps.